People claim to remember past lives. I claim to remember a very different present life. You are free to believe me or to disbelieve, but please take my word on it that I am not joking. This is very serious, a matter of importance. We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs.
Welcome to the Semi-Retired Podcast with your hosts, Dave Farrant and...
me, Richard Bonomo.
Hey, Richard, how you doing this week?
I'm doing good. You, Dave?
Excellent. Thank you very much. I wanted to say that the voice that you all heard before our intro music played is that of the subject of today's podcast, the American science fiction writer Philip K.Dick. Born in 1928, passed away in 1952, and was subject to some very unusual beliefs. Richard, can you get the ball going? The ball going, yeah.
Yeah.
Richard, can you get the ball rolling?
Yeah, so he was a very interesting guy. He wrote about 27 novels, a bunch of short stories, and a lot of these science fiction movies that we see today were all adapted from his stories. Some of them almost completely from the story, and some of them they took the kernel and ran with it and you know, expanded on his stories. But fascinating guy, incredible life. I mean, incredible life in a way. He's a little bit all over the place. He wrote some fascinating stuff. He also had a lot of issues with mental health, as we can get into. And that's also a recurring theme in his stories. There's a lot of talk about psychotic episodes, psychosis, always as a thing. And they just throw it out. Oh, maybe I'm having a psychotic episode.
And drug addiction as well, I think, right?
Yeah. Big drug addiction. He was hooked on opiates and stuff like that.
Yeah, so maybe the two went hand in hand. And clearly at some point, I think that bit of audio tape off the top was from 1977, so 5 years before his death or so, and he believes that he's living in an alternate reality.
And it's wild because when you think it's 20 years, 22, 23 years before The Matrix, and
yes.
He's basically saying we're all batteries.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, he literally nails the hypothesis, or the premise, rather, on which The Matrix is based. I found that chilling.
Oh, yeah, especially the last line is, with the computer program reality, and the only clue we have to is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. And there's that scene in The Matrix when Neo turns around and sees the cat walk through the doorway twice, right? And he goes, oh, deja vu.
Yeah, that's right. One of the agents says that's what that is. That's a glitch in the Matrix.
Yeah,
You've all noticed it, but that's really what it is.
Yeah, and pretty much it's like you can almost see the through line from this quote right to there and saying, here it is. Yeah.
Although he did not write The Matrix or any story on which it was based, it sounds like maybe somebody was inspired by him saying this.
Oh, absolutely. I would think so. And I think a lot of science fiction maybe not authors, but a lot of movie writers were inspired by some of his themes of, technology and mankind, and not necessarily in a good way. So,
the collision thereof?
Someone, I can't remember the name, someone said, at the time that he came out, a lot of science fiction was very hopeful of the future.
Yes.
It's going to be a utopia. It was going to be, think of like Star Trek and Star Wars, right? Where it has, everything is white. Like everything is white and happy. If you remember Space 1999,
absolutely.
TVs,
White and happy.
Everything's white and happy.
Polyester jumpsuits, one-piece jumpsuits.
Yeah,
for the guys.
and Dick basically, record scratch.
Yeah.
Hold the phone a second here. It's not going to be all white and happy. And a lot of his stories look at the darker side of technology, of human evolution, of fallout from nuclear war, and how this is going to affect us as humankind going forward. So a very different take on it. And I think it's an important take because we can't always walk around with, in this case, white-colored glasses.
No, we can't. And I think anybody who's listened to a few episodes of the podcast know that Richard and I tend towards the slightly darker, to prefer rather the slightly darker themes in our choices of entertainment.
And you can make a through line from some of his stories and his themes right to shows like Black Mirror, Love, Death, and
That's a very good
Love,
point.
Death, and Robots. A lot of the darker themes that you see exposed, especially in Black Mirror, where technology that's supposed to help us can also either control us or end up ruining our perception of what life actually is.
I'm reminded of our recent Robots episode where we kind of got into that a bit, And I think, you're talking about a cautionary tale or cautionary tales written by a guy who's got internal problems of his own through dint of nature in terms of his mental illnesses, and then chemically altered, enhanced by virtue of his drug abuse. So difficult guy.
And his drug abuse is not, it's not like cocaine or heroin or whatever. I mean, it tends to be on the opiate side, or there's like a lot of stuff that messes you up in a very different way and cause very long lasting and I think debilitating addiction.
But I think he started with amphetamines to help him write more. And in the early stages of his career, he always struggled with money. Didn't earn a lot. At one point early on, I think he and his wife were forced to eat actually canned dog food because he just wasn't bringing in enough money, and the uppers would help him produce. So he was marginal from that perspective as well.
Most of his books were never picked up by big publishing houses. He had a lot of trouble with that. Although in 1963, he wrote The Man in the High Castle, which has been adapted into an Amazon Prime series. But that was in 1963. So his earlier stuff is not really picked up by the bigger publishing houses. So he's selling books and short stories to magazines and not necessarily the top-notch science fiction magazines to earn a living so that he doesn't have to eat, he can eat premium dog food as opposed to Alpo. So sadly, it's a bit like Edgar Allan Poe, who also, didn't make a lot of money during his life, was a writer, and his stuff was just, I don't want to say too advanced at the time for things, but I think Edgar Allan Poe stuff was a little weird for some of the publishing houses. So he sold it to magazines, and Dick is sort of the same way. He had to sell his stuff to make money because his concepts weren't happy concepts. Yeah. And his stories they're not pretty stories. They're good stories. But I guess some people were like, yeah, we don't want to take a risk on this. So sorry, rejection letter.
This is the artist's trap sometimes, is to be out of step with the time in which you're creating. I'm thinking of Vincent van Gogh. Yeah. I mean, famously, he never made any money during his lifetime. Dick, as you're saying, just wasn't there in terms of what the industries were looking for as fodder. And also you wonder if the fact that he, suffered with mental health issues and this, and maybe he wasn't the best at presenting himself. If that matters or not, I'm speculating 100% here. But you do get that picture of a very, again, like obviously very troubled guy, marginal life, but a great author. Great ideas.
Yeah. So I read four that we're reviewing, 1, 2, 3, 4, five different film adaptations of his books. And I read 4 of them. And the whole time as I'm reading about his life and I'm reading the stories, all I can picture is Johnny Depp from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Yeah. Just picturing, especially when you get into A Scanner Darkly, the movie, which is really, Rose, we'll talk about it later. But this whole drug-induced kind of thing, I kept picturing Johnny Depp with the, Hunter S. Thompson, basically.
Yeah. And the lizards appearing, the lizard people. Yeah.
Yeah. I kept picturing that. So,
we were somewhere around Barstow when the drugs took hold. Whatever. He starts off the year hoping in Las Vegas.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm a big Hunter fan, by the way.
Yeah, same here. So fascinating. And quite a life, not an enviable life in that sense. No. In terms of the output, maybe, but not in terms of how his genius gets. I don't want to say misinterpreted, but possibly by a lot of people, and he ends up falling down this whole drug addicted.
Yeah, it can't have been much fun is the impression you get, right? Also married multiple times.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with that in and of itself, but there again, you get that sense of instability. I never had trouble finding a new mate after, the prior one, things had finished with the prior one either. Yeah. One you were mentioning earlier famously happened when he'd gone up to Vancouver or something like that.
Yeah, he went to speak at a conference in Vancouver and fell in love with a woman and announced during the conference, I'm going to marry this. I'm staying here because I've just fallen in love with someone he just met.
Carpe diem, baby.
Carpe diem, yes, seize the day. Wild. And, he stays in Vancouver for a little bit, and some guy who's at the conference offers to put him up for at his house, and 2 weeks later kicks him out because of his erratic behavior. And he ends up, I think, going back to the States.
And I think he had gone to Vancouver to avoid some kind of trouble that was brewing for him in California. He lived his whole life in California, and something was going on. That's why he took off to Vancouver to kind of get out of the way for a while till the heat died down.
And a kind of a sad death. He calls his therapist, complains of having a problem with his vision in one eye. Therapist tells him, get to a hospital right away, waits, has a stroke, gets taken to the hospital, has a second stroke at the hospital where he's announced to be brain dead, and 5 days later they take him off life support.
At the early age of 53. And there's one other element there of his life I wanted to throw in. There is he was born in 1928, so we're talking
in Chicago.
In Chicago, as the Depression and the is really taking hold. He had a twin sister who died young, very young. Yeah. Might even be like 6 weeks or 6 months old or something, because his mother or their mother gave the majority of the milk that was available to him as opposed to his sister. So his sister literally starved to death. And the family set up a combined grave for them. She was buried in the grave with her half engraved, and Philip's half was left blank. And so, as someone said somewhere, like he knew through his entire life, through all his troubles, he knew where he was going to wind up. He had a very clear picture where it was all headed, which to my mind would have to do a number on your head. As mentally healthy as you might be, that's a weird thing, I think.
Yeah, because you'll see couples do that. Like one passes away and they'll put a gravestone, and then they might put the wife or the husband's info on there.
Yes.
But to do it in advance, like for your child, is a little. Yeah. I mean, they didn't write his name on the grave. That would have been that would have fucked with you as a kid,
dates
right?
off, right? Yeah, that's it.
That would have messed with you.
Which got me thinking, and this is a tangent, but it's a brief one. I was thinking about that, and I read somewhere this week that Joey Ramone from the Ramones was born with a twin brother growing out of his back.
Oh, wild.
That he had to have surgically removed. Yeah. Why I thought of that, I don't know, but if I don't mention it here, it's going to die. So now you all know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, those are weird. I've seen photos of those things at when I worked at the hospital. We had documented cases of that.
That's why, because I'm thinking of a character that will come up in one of the movies who is growing out of somebody else's body.
Oh, that's right.
That's why I connected the two dots. So it wasn't just pure tangent there.
And oddly enough, Dick and Ursula Le Guin went to the same high school and both graduated in 1947 from the same high school, but didn't know each other. And there's two great science fiction minds. Yeah. Very different styles, very different stories, but from the same school. Yeah,
she wrote The Lathe of Heaven. We were talking about it a few weeks ago. I tried to find a copy of the movie. They're out there on Amazon, but they're like $150. I'm not doing that. Can't seem to find them anywhere else. Okay. I don't know why. I saw the movie when I'm thinking in like maybe 1980 or something like that. It's really good.
So we're going to so we've covered a bit of Philip K. Dick's life, and we'll go into, so as we said, some of his stories and novels were adapted into major motion pictures, and we chose the most successful of the adaptations, let's say, because there are some that are not quite as successful and kind of bad. So we'll skip over those. So
I tried one this week and I couldn't. I kept hacking through it in 10-minute increments. And it was like, when you're shoveling snow in the winter and it's just you're just digging through the bank and you're cold and the snow's in your boots and you want to give up. And it was like that. I'll mention its name afterwards. But
yeah. So, like I said, for the fives, I read the story or the novel or novella, depending on the case. So we're going to start off with 1982, probably the most famous of his adaptations.
Blade Runner.
We've said multiple times on the podcast, fantastic movie. It's one of our favorites.
I think if I had to take one movie to a desert island, I've thought about this many times, I think it would be Blade Runner. I still think that's it.
So you're assuming there's electricity on this island?
I am assuming, yeah.
No, I just got the DVD. I'll stare at it.
Well, maybe I could generate power from the local electric eels and use that to power my portable DVD player that I would somehow look at. I don't know.
Sounds possible.
Yeah, Dick would have thought so.
So Blade Runner is based on the novella Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
What a great title.
Isn't it?
It's fantastic.
Some similarities. This is the one I found the weirdest. I just finished this yesterday. Some similarities between the movie and the story, but the story ends in a completely different way from the movie. And as we know, the movie, we have our hero,
Deckard.
Rick
Deckard, actually.
Okay, so Blade Runner is not mentioned at all in the book. In the book, they're called bounty hunters. So where does the term Blade Runner come from? It's Ridley Scott bought the rights to the book because he loved the title of it. The book has nothing to do with the story or the movie, but he liked the title and he wanted to use the term Blade Runner instead of bounty hunter because it sounds more futuristic, I guess.
He's right. I mean, it's indisputably cooler and better and kind of cyberpunkier, the whole thing.
Oh, yeah. And when I'm reading the story and it keeps saying bounty hunter, I keep going, typo, typo.
Yeah, I want to do search and replace in there sort of thing and just flip it out, right?
Yeah, I do. Great story, right? Basically, he's a Blade Runner, which is a
replicant hunter.
Yeah.
In that world, which is Los Angeles 2049 or something, humanity has developed replicants, which are androids that are used for dirty or unpleasant labor, tasks that humans wouldn't normally do, sometimes for pleasure as well. There's pleasure pleasure models, as we discover, and some of them have begun to revolt, either in the off-world colonies or actually on Earth itself, and Blade Runners are sent to find them and retire them.
A polite way of saying, killing them.
Yeah, killing them. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So in the story, it's kind of the same thing, except Earth has had some nuclear fallout, and the only people left on Earth are the people who can afford to get off and go to Mars.
Oh, okay.
So Mars is like the new Earth, you know? Okay. Maybe that's where Elon gets the idea.
Yeah, probably, yeah. Yeah, I'm hoping he'll go, actually.
Yeah, he can go first.
Yeah, that's enough, yeah.
And so Deckard is behind. He's a bounty hunter in here, and his job is to eliminate the androids. And it starts off a bit the same way, where he has to go to the main headquarters where they make the replicants, and he has to give a test to Rachel. Almost word for word for some parts between the movie and the book there, where he does the test with they ask the questions of...
the Voight-Kampff test or something?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Which, it's basically an empathy test, because the replicants can't feel empathy. They have no empathy towards it. That's why they can kill with no remorse, because they have no empathy. And that's, you see a lot of that later on in the book, which is not really explored much in the movie.
I guess in the movie, we assume they have no empathy. They test for empathy. But in the culminating scene with Roy Batty on the roof, he actually displays... Is it empathy or is it sympathy towards Deckard? Because he lets Deckard live before he makes his famous speech as he dies, because he's got like a 4-year lifespan is the story. Anybody who hasn't seen it is going to think all this is kind of a bit chaotic. But this replicant is dying, this powerful replicant who's aware of himself as a replicant and knows that he's got this short lifespan, is dying, and he's got Deckard at his mercy, can let him die, fall off the roof, but he chooses to save him after delivering a beautiful brief monologue that's remembered as the Tears in the Rain speech from Blade Runner. Look it up.
Yeah, so that's a big, completely different from the story. So there's a scene in the book where one of the characters is housing Pris, one of the replicants, Roy Batty's wife. Oh. He has a wife in this one. They're the last 3. So 8 of them have escaped. And I forget in the movie if it's 8 replicants who have escaped. I think it might be
right.
Yeah,
that sounds right.
And so they've killed a few of them. There's a famous scene of the girl going through the window.
So Roy's married.
Yeah, he's got a wife. She's called a wife. She's a replicant also.
Okay.
And the guy who houses them is some guy that they call a chicken head, because
I've been called a chicken head.
Hopefully not in the same way as
back in high school,
there's chicken heads,
yeah.
And there's another term for it. There's another type of thing. So essentially, Isidore is he's left behind, and the air and the fallout has affected his brain, and he's not smart. He's not. He's like considered. I guess they call them special. And he's got reduced mental facilities, and so those people are referred to as chicken heads, because I guess they can run around with like a chicken without a head.
Okay, yeah.
He's living in his building. He drives a delivery truck, and he comes across Pris living in the building. And he becomes, he's attracted to her, and he wants to help her out, and he feels useful. There's a scene later on where Pris, Roy Batty, and his wife are in the apartment. He sees a spider. And so at this time, there are almost no animals. And the obsession everybody has is with animals. Okay. To own a live animal is a sign of class, of like, I've found there. I'll get back to the other animals, but there's a scene where, since we're talking empathy, where he finds a spider, and he captures the spider, and he brings it. And Roy Batty's wife says, why does it have so many legs? What is that? And he's like, it's a spider. He says, why does it have so many legs? He goes, it has 8 legs. And he's like, why does it have 8 legs? And so Pris and the other are like, well, I wonder if it'll walk with 4 legs. And he's like, what are you doing? And they take the spider from him, and with nail clippers, they cut off the 4 legs. Wow. And Isidore is like, he's like brought to tears of this, because there's almost no animal life or insect life left on Earth. And here are these people who have absolutely no problem as a thought experiment to cut the legs off the spider. And he feels so bad for the spider and it's not moving. So Roy Batty comes over, lights a match, and puts the match near the spider to make it move. So you see, it's still alive. Poor Isidore feels so bad. He takes the spider and he drowns it, because he feels bad that it's suffering. The other 3, the replicants, they don't understand his feeling towards the spider. And he's like, well, we just wanted to see if it could walk with 4 legs.
What a dark scene, eh?
Yeah, it's a dark scene. It's odd. And that character, Isidore, would be what in the movie is the guy who plays chess with the owner of the company, right?
Yeah, okay.
It's that same sort of thing.
Yeah, gotcha.
So that whole scene about them going there and plucking the eyeballs out and meeting the creator never happens in the book. So the interesting part of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is that there are electric sheep in the story.
I hoped so, because I haven't read any of these. I really hope there were.
It's wild as I'm reading this. I was like, it's beyond me. So Rick Deckard owns an electric sheep. And the thing was, he actually owned a sheep. He owned a Shetland whatever sheep that died. And because he had improperly cleaned the bale of hay that he gave to the sheep, and there was a piece of baling wire that scratched the sheep and it got infected and died. And he felt so bad that he bought an electric sheep as something to have, right? And his neighbor has a pony, has a horse.
An electric pony?
No, a real horse.
Oh, okay.
And he's jealous of the guy, and he keeps trying to trade.
Sure.
He's jealous because the guy has a live horse, and all he has is an electric sheep, and he hates the electric sheep, but he had to buy it because his wife felt so bad. Oh, Deckard has married. He's married in the book. He has a wife.
And do we know in the book if Deckard is a replicant or not? Because that was the big debate after Blade Runner, right?
Exactly, right. Where Ridley Scott said, yes, he's a replicant.
Yeah.
Harrison Ford said, no, I am not.
Yes.
Sorry, you're an actor. You had no process.
Harrison
here.
Ford. Back off.
Yeah. In the book, it's mentioned at one point when he gives the test to Rachel. She says, well, I want to give one to you. I want to make sure you're not a replicant.
Okay.
He says, I've already had the test as part of my police procedures. I've had the test and I passed. I know I'm not a replicant. So it's very clear, and there's no other allusions to it as to whether he is a replicant. It's clear that he's not.
Oh, in the book, it's clear that he's not.
In the book, it's clear
the ambiguity that surrounded Blade Runner all those years.
No, he's
there.
not. But there is a portion where at one point he goes to capture one of the replicants who's passing off as an opera singer. Go figure. And she figured she could hide best as a public figure, a famous public figure. They
hiding in plain sight.
And he goes there and he's confronting her. He's asking her the questions of the test, and she keeps throwing it in such a way that he can't register the right response to the test. And she keeps throwing odd remarks out. And so at one point she thinks he's a sex pervert and calls the cops, and the cops show up and arrest Deckard. And Deckard has to go back to the police station. It's a different police station. They don't recognize his name. They don't recognize his boss. And he figures out later, all the people in this police station are all replicants.
Oh, wow.
And this is how they protect themselves. They set up a kind of, not a society, but like a protective layer. And so that when something goes wrong and someone suspects one of their people from being a replicant, they send in these cops to take them away. It's really odd. One of the Blade Runners doesn't realize he's a replicant. And when he does find out, he asks Deckard to kill him.
Well, see, and I think
it's very, very different.
And if I'm not mistaken, it's asked in the movie if Rachel knows she's a replicant, right? And I don't recall what the answer is.
You see that in the beginning of the novel, and you see it in the movie. At one point, he's asking her a bunch of questions, and in the novel, it's slightly different. He believes she's human. They're filming him. Unbeknownst to him, they're filming him during this process. It comes to the conclusion that it seems to be that she's human. Rachel and the owner basically come to the conclusion that as a Blade Runner, he would have terminated people who are humans because they failed the test. And she says, I passed it.
He could have mistakenly terminated retired human beings.
Yes.
Okay.
And Deckard's boss makes a remark that there's studies being looked at. So people of inferior mental capacity, let's say people in homes, in mental homes, may not have the capacity and could possibly fail the test and pass as replicants, in which case we would terminate them. So that theme is brought in there. In a lot of Dick's stories, you have a lot of themes of mental health issues, psychotic. Am I having a psychotic episode? Yeah. Some of the characters will say.
Yeah, what's real, what isn't real, right?
Yeah. So there's a lot of mental health issues brought up, and so that whole thing of, so she passes off, and he's like, oh my God, she's human, and then he makes a little realization, asks one last question, and boom, she fails, and so he turns to the owner and he says, does she know? And you see that in the movie. He turns to him and says, does she know?
Yeah.
And the owner says, no, but I think she suspects it from your last question.
Right.
And he turns to her and she goes, yes, I do now. So she knows she's a replicant.
Right.
Okay.
See, I love that.
I don't remember if that's in the movie, that little portion where she acknowledges that she's a replicant.
Yeah, I feel like that wasn't there. I think you were there and maybe they just left that part out.
Yeah, it may be in one of the weird, because there's like a bunch of different cuts of the movie. Anyway, that's explored a little later on.
But I love that aspect of Dick's, vision for the androids, that they want to defend themselves. So they have a sense of danger, community danger. So they're not just, dumb servants, right? Yeah. Shoveling coal or whatever, I'm making this up. That they have a sense of identity. identity in a sense of, they want to protect themselves. I love that. It makes it so interesting.
And there's a scene a little later once Deckard and Rachel end up in a hotel and they have sex. In the lead up to it, she asks, "Can androids have children?" And it's thrown out there, and then you think, Blade Runner 2049.
Oh, yeah.
That's the thing, right? Where an android had a child. So
it's
there. The kernel of it is in the original story. So from there, they made 2 movies.
Yeah, which is, again, I know we're not focusing on 2049 today, the Blade Runner sequel, but boy, is that a terrific piece of filming by a local guy, Denis Villeneuve. I love that.
2049 is Denis Villeneuve. So the original by Ridley Scott. Yeah, great movie. It's got a great flow. Again, it's not post-apocalyptic, but it's always raining.
Yeah,
you got that feel that something's gone wrong with the weather.
Kind of mid-apocalyptic, like it's happening right now,
Yeah. And so I thought that was interesting, the obsession with animals. A few times it's mentioned on this day, all the badgers died, and 2 days later, all the beavers died. And so at one point he comes across a toad and he thinks it's real, and he brings it home and he shows it to his wife, and his wife turns it over and finds the port where you recharge it. And he feels bad. And this is at the end, and he goes to bed, and his wife, to make him feel better, like he got the electric sheep to make her feel better after the live sheep died, and she knows he feels bad because it's not a real toad, because toads are marked in the little book that everyone carries, which is the guide to the cost of animals. Everybody's got their little guide. And so she feels bad, and she calls up the pet store and orders artificial flies so that the artificial toad can catch artificial flies, so he'll feel better.
Yeah.
It's just really weird.
But I can see to your earlier point, this being a 1966 story, Androids, Electric Sheep rather, how that would have been a hard sell in Hollywood at the time with all of the forward-looking, Lost in Space on TV and Star Trek with all its, wondrous, everybody's, kind of, we're all one, the Federation and all that, well, they're Klingons, but I can see where he was at a step.
And so, in the movie, we have our Blade Runner Deckard, who's only known as Deckard in the movie, but in the book is Rick Deckard.
They never say Rick? Oh, that's true.
I don't think they say, because if you look on IMDb, he's listed as Deckard. We have these big scenes in the movie where the remaining 2 androids try to find their way to the creator to get their expiration date. And it's mentioned in the book also the 4-year lifespan. Because she says, "I've been alive 2 years. How much longer do I have?" And she asks Deckard this. Rachel asks Deckard. And he says, "From our calculations, I think you have 2 years left to go." And so she wants him to run away with her. And he's like, "I'm going to have only 2 years, then whatever." He's already married at this point, but he has this conflict.
Do you remember what Terrell says to Terrell, who's the leader of Terrell Corporation? Yeah. Says to Roy Batty in the movie when Roy is about to kill him and is complaining about the fact that he's been given this limited lifespan. And Terrell says, "The light that burns twice as bright lasts half as long."
And you have burned ever so brightly, Roy.
Nice. There it is.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. So there's no Terrell in the book. It's a different company name, whatever, but it's all there. And he's the owner of the company. You see him early on. You never hear from him again in the book. The movie has a great ending scene where the big battle, right, on the building where he's after Roy.
That's right.
And there's that smashing through the walls and grabbing him and breaking his fingers. And Harrison Ford is trying to get away, and he's, tries to almost falls off the building. And then the famous scene where he pulls him up. So I'm expecting this, and Deckard figures out where the 3 remaining androids are left. Now, at this point, he's killed 3 androids in one day. And the thing is, no one's ever killed more than X number of androids in a day. And his boss refuses for him to go to sleep. He has to retire the last 3 androids that day, or they're going to get away.
That's intense.
Rachel keeps offering to help him, because she's a Nexus 6, right? This is what they're after. And so he meets up with her at the hotel, and they have sex, and then it doesn't work out. She leaves. He goes to the apartment, figures it out, and ends up in a really, let's wrap this up, boys. He retires the last 3 androids.
Just like that?
There's no smashing through the walls. There's no tears and rain story. There's nothing. He just basically shoots them and they die, and then he goes home and he collects $3,000.
That's the end?
Yeah, kind of. He goes home, and that's when, he goes on goes on his quest to the desert. That's where he finds the toad, comes home, his wife's there, and he goes to sleep. And essentially that's it.
Kind of a lunch bag letdown there, it sounds like.
One last oddness. Rachel in this one does not hook up with him at the end. They have the scene in the hotel, and it comes out that she's done this with Blade Runners 7 or 8 times before.
Oh,
where she's done the test with them, bedded them, and then they can't kill her.
So she's a Blade Runner groupie.
She's a Blade Runner groupie, and she plays the Blade Runners in a way that she knows after they've slept with them, they can't kill her. And so she just keeps doing it, and she goes right back to the company. And so at one point, when he's killed the first 3 androids, he gets $3,000, goes to the pet store, and buys a goat. He wants to buy rabbits, and they convince him to buy a goat.
An electric
Dave,
goat?
no, a real goat.
A real goat.
He goes on, and they don't mention the price, but the $3,000 is a small down payment on the goat, and he's gonna have to pay for 48 months. He's gonna have to pay a certain amount for his goat. He's happy. He brings the goat home, puts it on the roof. The wife is all happy, and after Rachel has sex with him and leaves, he comes back home after his killing, and his wife says, "By the way, the goat's dead." And he's like, "What do you mean the goat's dead?" Yeah, some woman came over and threw the goat off the roof. So Rachel, not only does she betray him, she kills his goat for no reason. Throws the goat off the roof, kills it, and then goes back to work.
Yeah.
And it's just weird.
Maybe I'm beginning to see why it took 14 years to put this into some kind of workable screenplay.
Yeah. And I think, if I had read the story before I saw the movie, I could have appreciated it. I mean, I liked the story. It was great. And it had like really weird aspects with the animals. And I won't even get into the whole empathy machines and the mercerism, which is the religion that's happening in there in the background, and the empathy machine where people go. And when you feel empathetic, you grab the 2 handles and you channel your empathy through the machine so everybody can share your empathy. Bizarre. I won't even get into it. I just did, but I won't. So there's all these things where obviously they looked at this and said, "What the hell is this? This is too much mysticism. Let's get this out of the way. Let's cut to the story." Good story. It's a good story. I think it stands on its own. But having seen the movie, you have so many expectations, and you expect Deckard to be a certain way, and he's not that kind of character. And there's a lot of characters introduced in the movies that really don't even appear in the story.
I feel like I would have had trouble disconnecting from, because I know the movie so well. I mean, that's me. That's a failing of mine. Yeah. I think I would have had trouble disconnecting from the movie.
As I
read through.
I did. There was portions on like, this is all wrong. Oh yeah, sorry. This is the origin point. Sorry. Yeah, okay. And try to take it in.
Yeah.
And to me, the thing that threw me off was the electric animals.
Yeah.
It's just so weird. I can get by the religion aspect because, whatever. And the empathy machine, you see these kind of weird things. I've read that in other, but electric animals. Okay. So, second movie, 1990.
This time it's Total Recall with none other than the Governator himself, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Schwarzenegger. And I didn't know this was from a Philip K. Dick book until you mentioned it to me last week, or maybe I knew it once and forgot. Yeah. But I recall it being one of those science fiction movies that I went to see at the time in the theater and just loved, again, its general weirdness. The fact that the main character, Quaid, I think his name is going to go take a vacation, like these virtual vacations that are a product on the market at this time. And while he's going to take his virtual vacation, he wants to go to Mars because in this world, there's people living on Mars. Turns out he's actually been on Mars. He starts to, again, his head starts to break down. His mental reality starts to break down. Very Dickian, I guess. I don't want to say dickish because that sounds bad, but Dickian in that sense. And, but again, I know you've read the book from same year as Electric Sheep.
So this is a short story called "We Can Remember It for You Wholesale," which I thought is such a title of its time, right?
Yeah.
Wholesale.
Yeah.
It's a weird it's a short story. The premise is pretty much the same. And he's just a regular schlub. He works at some factory, whatever, and he wants to take a vacation. He keeps having dreams of Mars. He keeps, I want to go to Mars. And his wife thinks he's crazy and she's getting mad at him. And if you keep talking like this, I'm going to leave you, blah, blah, blah. And he ends up one day, he says he's going to work, but he doesn't. He's made an appointment and he shows up at Recall. It's spelled
Kall, right?
Yeah, so one L. Yeah, so he calls it something. And then she says, oh, it's recall, just like, to recall something. So I guess he called it Recall, I'm guessing, from the spelling. And he goes through, and it's the same sort of thing. He has the interview with the guy and tells him, so you want a Mars vacation? You want to be a secret agent?
He selects secret agent.
Yeah, and they don't mention anything about a girlfriend, right? Because in the Schwarzenegger movie, he yes, I want a girlfriend too, yes, and he picks the type, right? And it's picks I forget if they say Latina or whatever, right. But there's some sort of thing with criteria where he gets to pick the girl he's going to have a thing with. There's no mention of that in the story.
Well, he's dreaming basically, right? While he's having this virtual vacation is what it is. Yeah,
but he picks the parameters beforehand, whereas here it's Mars secret agent. Right, and he goes in and then they call in, sir, there's something wrong. There's no room in his brain. And they're like, well, just look for some vacation and take out the 2 weeks vacation and replace it.
So it's like a hard disk that's got no...
Yeah, you kind of get that implication that there's a hard drive and they can actually see the portions of your memory that are erasable.
Well, this is Arnold in the movie anyways, and I can actually believe that.
Yeah, so it goes wrong and back and forth. In the book, it's not quite the same. He never goes to Mars. He may have been a secret agent, actually. He is a secret agent. That comes out. He gets visited by people from the company, whatever. His wife is not in on the whole thing, and his wife is his wife. She's not like in the movie. His wife is an agent. He's been put there to watch over him.
Watching him,
despises him in a way because she's been given this low-grade assignment because she doesn't realize who he is. Like in the movies, the wife doesn't know that he's this super fantastic Mr. Spy guy. He's just some guy she's got to watch.
Right, because in the movie, he actually is a secret agent. And he's actually the right-hand man of the governor of the Martian colony, Cohagen, I think.
Yes,
and we find out later on that there's this whole double-cross thing going on.
So none of that happens in the story. He ends up going back 2 or 3 times to get his memory fixed. And the wife leaves him at one point. She's like, I've had enough of this. And she just walks out. She's not in on it. He suspects his wife's in on it, but she's not. And she just walks out and they kind of fix him up. And they took the kernel of that and they really expanded on it for the movie.
It was Paul Verhoeven, right?
Yeah. Paul
Verhoeven. Of RoboCop fame, I think.
That's right. RoboCop and Starship Troopers.
And again, you get the sense of, in very dickish kind of way, of this like split reality. What's real, what's not real. Kind of like the Matrix. Yeah. Mention what he's saying there. Am I in the real world, or am I in some kind of parallel facsimile that's not really real? It gets very deep.
He at first he has some misgivings. Am I really going to remember this? And they said, yes, our memories are better than actual memories because actual memories fade with time, whereas these are implanted deep and they're really going to be there. And there's a whole package. Like he's having a Mars thing. So they go, Mrs. Blah, blah, can you bring out package 286 and 422, whatever? And they bring out these artifacts that are going to be like tokens, like, like a passport from when he went to Mars.
Right.
So he's given like...
or like we bring back shells from the beach.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And the thing is, in his drawer at home, he has this little matchbox and there's like Martian larvae in it and he doesn't know where he got it from. And it turns out he had been to Mars. He doesn't end up going to Mars. There's no terraforming Mars or anything. But they have like these packages where they're going to give them artifacts. So when you come back, it's like going on vacation. You've actually had your things. This is something I've talked to with people about having when the advent of VR came out. And so wouldn't it be great to do VR tourism? So you say, well, I can't afford to go to Rome, but it'd be great if I could slap some glasses on and walk through Rome as if I was actually there, And I thought that'd be kind of cool to go to places like that. And so you see that with the Recall. It's like, I can't afford to go to Mars and be a secret agent, but I could. So it's almost like there's a Westworldy there too, right? Because not only is he having a memory of vacationing on Mars, but he's vacationing on Mars as a spy.
You see, I would do that. I wouldn't put on the VR goggles and walk around here like, watching, kind of roll. But I feel like if I knew there was a recall like that, I feel like I would try that out. Not sure I'd go to Mars, but what about you?
Well, maybe not Mars since there's no air.
Oh, that's a problem. Yeah.
I think it would be interesting. And I wonder at what point it would become an addiction and you would spend your entire life getting recalled, having recall give you all these greater and greater fantasies, at which point you wouldn't be able to distinguish what's real and what's not real.
Here we are again.
And Total Recall, there's 2 versions. There's a Schwarzenegger version and there's a later remake of it.
You mentioned someone's done it. Is it worth it?
I liked it. It's obviously different. But the special effects are better because I don't know if you remember some of those scenes in the original are
like when the big rubber head comes off on that woman. I know.
Or when they pull the tracking device out of his nose,
Arnold's nose,
and you can so tell that that's an artificial face as they're pulling this gigantic marble out of his nose.
Yeah, that's right.
And even the cars at one point, like there's these little cars coming up, and it feels like they're on a set or inside somewhere. The cars look like they're just like flat sheet metal cars in the future.
Yeah, it fall apart in that way.
The explosions are tiny. It's like someone set off a firecracker and like 10 people die. You see them all jumping. You're like, the firecracker went off here. What's going on? So the remake has it's more up to date. Whether you like it better, the other one is campy, has a certain campiness to it.
You're right. It's campy.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
I don't remember if they do the whole terraforming of Mars at the end in the remake.
Yeah, Arnold almost plays it camp. Arnold kind of is campy, I think, almost by nature.
Camp Shenega.
Yeah. Yeah. But here he seems to lean into it.
Yeah.
And it's okay. It works. Doesn't really ruin it.
And it's funny, when I was reviewing these things, I was like, wasn't The Running Man also a Philip K. Dick? I looked it up, and no, The Running Man was a Stephen King. Writing under Bachman, when he was writing as Richard Bachman.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, because I didn't read any of the Bachman books. Yeah. Oh, I didn't realize he was Running Man too.
Because that's kind of in that same sort of. It has a sort of Dickian feel to it. The Running Man. I don't know if you remember the movie where people go into a game show where they're chased by violent guys with saws for hands and whatever, and he's framed as a policeman because he saw a crime that wasn't supposed to happen.
Yeah, it's a long time. It's ringing a bell.
Yeah, with Richard Dawson as the show host.
Yes. Yeah.
So from there, we move up into 2002. I wonder if this is maybe the most commercially successful. I didn't do this. Is Minority Report with?
I bet it was with Tom Cruise. Actually,
Tom Cruise. Yeah.
I bet it was. I love the movie. I mean, I'll be so curious to hear how it differed from the book. But that's obviously one of my favorite science fiction movies of all time, despite the fact that Tom Cruise is in it. I'm not a huge Tom Cruise fan, but he doesn't commit any atrocities here. He just kind of does his thing. The basis of the movie is that it's set in Washington, D.C. at some point in the future. And in fact, the director, whose name eludes me at this point, said that when they made the movie, one of the disciplines they set on themselves is that they would talk to futurists. Spielberg, of course. Yeah. Oh, yeah, Spielberg. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Rick Spielberg? No, not Rick Spielberg. Steven Spielberg. How can I forget? I'm sorry, baby. Hold on. I'm sorry, Steve. Yeah, he said that they talked to futurists and they made sure that any of the technology you see in the movie is predicted as being possible, like the eye scans for the advertising and the little spider robots, tiny robots that look for him in his bath. According to the people they spoke to, yeah, that's all very, very possible within the time frame the movie is set. So off we go. But at any rate, the premise is pre-crime. The ability to see a crime before it's committed and therefore stop it from taking place. And in the book, how does that go?
Pretty much the same way. The premise is pretty tight to the movie in that, we have the three precogs again who see the future somewhat in advance. I think they mention in the book it's like up to 2 weeks in advance. Yeah,
there's a time frame there. Yeah.
So and they've eliminated crime. This has been running for, I forget if it's 5 years, 20 years. I forget in the book. They've eliminated crime. There's been no murders in the city for the last 5 years. Nobody remembers what a dead body looks like. It's not just murders, right? I mean, it could be robberies. It could be rapes. Could be whatever. Like in the movie,
jaywalking.
In the movie, it tends to be murders that they're preventing, right? But in the book, it's alluded that it's all crime. And again, you have that guy who shows up, who's questioning the whole thing, who's supposed to take over from the main character in the book. Whereas I think in the movie, he's just there. He's sent there by Congress to be an overseer.
He's investigating the pre-crime unit because there's some intimation that it's not working properly or it's over budget or something like that. That's the Colin Farrell character, right? And he's there to watch Cruise.
One of the points brought up is everyone who's captured for pre-crime ends up going to this like detention center. And there's like thousands of people in there and they all claim they're innocent. And he's like, well, but we caught them in the pre-crime. He goes, yeah, but if you catch them before they commit the crime, they're innocent. They never committed the crime. And this is the whole premise that the criminals are fighting for. And then I guess people in Congress or whatever are looking at the ethical issue of keeping someone in a detention center for a crime they didn't commit. But would have. You kind of wrap your head around
down that rabbit hole again. And that's the end of part 1. Next Tuesday, part 2 drops on Semi-Retired. You won't want to miss it.